Welcome back everyone. Today we'll be beginning with the session 5 of the week 3 of the course Retail Marketing Strategy. So if you remember, as far as the last module was concerned, we had a brief discussion about the consumer decision making processes as far as the input stage was concerned, in which we precisely looked at the impact of marketing agents, let's say, which was all about understanding from where the consumer receives information. Now, that can happen through family, reference groups, opinion leaders, or co workers, or it can also happen through the marketing initiatives which are precisely taken by marketer, or maybe we can say a retailer in this case. Now, as we move forward, we'll be again continuing with the remaining facets of consumer decision making processes. Precisely, we'll be touching upon the psychological field. Now, to understand in simplistic way, psychological field is all about the internal states of an individual, or maybe you can also relate it with the elements of the personality of an individual, or in other words we can say it is something which is connected with an individual minds, and it eventually determines how an individual behaves, or what are the kinds of products and services that individual will prefer, or even as far as the retailing is concerned, what are the kinds of retail stores that this particular individual is going to like. Apart from that, we'll also be looking at the consumer motives and channel preferences, and as we move further in the end, we'll also be looking at the meaning of the private label. Now see, put simplistically, role of psychological field is very important as far as consumer behavior is concerned. As I just said, whenever we are talking about psychological field, we'll be looking at it from two perspectives. One is from the perspectives of why consumer would buy certain products and service offerings. Another perspectives is all going to be about why a particular individual will prefer certain type of retail stores. Let's say if there are four retailers which are offering products at identical prices, and even the range of the products is also very similar, so which retailer an individual is going to pick up might be related with their psychological field. Now we'll first understand the first psychological factor, which is motivation. Motivation simply means the zeal that drives people to act, or if we look at it from the perspective of marketing, we can say what motivates prospects or consumers to buy certain products or service offerings. We'll be understanding motivation primarily from the perspective of two theories. One is hygiene and motivation factor theory, which is also called as Frederick Herzberg two-factor theory, and two-factor here essentially indicates the hygiene as well as motivation factors. Apart from that, we'll also be looking at the retailing or marketing in general from the perspective of Abraham Maslow's need hierarchy theory. Now, let's first understand what are hygiene and motivation factors. Now, the first thing which you need to understand is this theory marks a clear distinction between satisfying and dissatisfying factors. What the scholar is trying to say is these are merely not opposites of each other, right? So that's why they get into the further bifurcation of hygiene factors and motivation factors. Now, hygiene factors are those factors, the absence of such factors will lead to dissatisfaction or demotivation. Now, in another ways, this also indicates that the presence of hygiene factors is not going to motivate an individual to buy certain product or services. And if we talk about retailing, the presence of hygiene factors is not going to motivate an individual to buy from a particular retailer. However, the absence of such factors is definitely going to demotivate them. Now, whenever you are talking about motivation factors, these are precisely the factors which will motivate an individual to buy certain products or services. Now let's consider the example of a mobile, right? We all know there are a plethora of options as far as the mobiles are concerned in the market, and there are many brands also, whether it is Vivo, Xiaomi, Realme, Apple, iPhone, Samsung, Motorola. There are indeed a lot of brands. Now let's consider you are thinking of buying a mobile. Now whenever you are looking at hygiene factors, which means the factors the presence of which is taken for granted and will not create a motivational effect. If the absence of such factors is there, then this is definitely going to demotivate you from picking up that particular mobile option. Let's say, as far as hygiene factors is concerned, you would expect a decent screen size. As far as today's, the options are concerned, the screen size of 6, 7 has become quite common. Now this can be considered as an hygiene factor. Then let's say decent quality of camera can also be considered as a hygiene factor, right? A decent fast processor is also going to be considered as a hygiene factor, right? So all these are factors which could be considered as hygiene, and I'm again repeating it, the presence of such factors is not going to motivate you buy that particular mobile. Indeed, it is going to be the presence of motivation factors which will motivate you pick up that particular option or will encourage you to buy that particular option. See, if you go back in time, even the presence of merely radio in a mobile was considered to be a motivation factor, but those days are completely gone now. It's not like just because radio is available in a mobile you are going to buy it. Rather, you will hardly see people using the option of radio as far as the mobiles are concerned. So this has also to do with how technology evolves or how things change or even how consumer evolves with respect to what they expect from marketers. Now, as far as we consider motivation factor, this could be one of the motivation factors as far as the mobiles are concerned. Now, the shape of the mobile, this can be completely flipped, can be considered as a very good motivation factor. Or let's say very fast processor which is not available with any other mobile can also be considered as a motivation factor, or exceptionally good quality of camera could also be considered as a motivation factor, something which is not available with other options but could be available with few options or only one option. Now that becomes more of a perspective of motivational factors. So I'm again repeating it, the mere presence of hygiene factors is not going to motivate you to buy certain product or services, rather absence is going to demotivate you, right? But when you look at motivation factors, the presence of only such factors will motivate you buy certain products or services. Now let's understand these, whether it is hygiene factors or motivation factors, from the perspective of a retailer or a retail establishment. Now, as far as a retailer is concerned, maybe you can say the presence of good assortment, quality products, supportive after sales services, availability of discounts could be considered as hygiene factors, right? Because as far as today's markets are concerned, whether it is an online channel or offline channel, both are definitely going to offer a decent assortment of products, right? But as compared to online channels, as there is no limit to the shelf space, so you can eventually see much more products as compared to physical store, which are inhibited or delimited by the availability of physical space. Now, these few examples that we discussed, whether it is good assortment, availability of quality products, after sales support services, or availability of discounts, could be considered as hygiene factors. But whenever you are talking about a retail establishment, motivation factors could be availability of price matching guarantee, which means the retailer is kind of claiming, if you show them the options in which lower prices are displayed, whether it is leading online channels or let's say another physical or brick or mortar retailers, they are willing to match the prices. Now this might emerge as a motivation factors, but considering the today's competitive dynamics, it again gets much more difficult to offer price matching guarantee as far as the physical stores are concerned, because the cost structures are entirely different as far as online and offline channels are concerned. Now another example could be, let's say a retailer is offering a no questions asked return policy. Now this could also be considered as one of the motivation factors, because in another ways, especially in physical retailers or mortar retailers, this policy is not much seen. Like I'm precisely talking about the no questions asked policy, return policy, whereas the online channels are concerned, consumers have enjoyed this for a lot of time as far as online retailing dynamics is concerned. Apart from that, even how the retailer works towards building relationship with customers can also be considered as a motivation factor. And the best thing about this is this could not be even easily copied by other retailer, right? So this even can be considered as a motivation factor. Another example could be, let's say if we are talking about, if you remember in the last session we had precisely discussed about DMart and Nature's Basket. Now as far as Nature's Basket is concerned, the availability of exotic fruits and vegetables, or let's say imported fruits and vegetables which might not be available at other grocery retailers, can also be considered as a very good example of a motivation factor. Whereas if you talk about DMart, these things might not be available, whereas the motivation for DMart precisely comes from the fact that they offer value offerings, or as it was written in their mission and vision objectives, that DMart is all about offering very high value for the every rupee spent. Now for them, this is going to be their USP and can also be looked at from the perspective of motivation factors. So precisely, I understand you got an idea about hygiene and motivation factors, but again I would repeat, we are looking at it, or we just looked at it from two perspectives. One was about regarding products and services, because hygiene and motivation factors can also be looked at from the perspective of product and service offerings. Otherwise, they can also be looked at from the perspective of a retail establishment or a retail store, where we see what are the factors, the presence of which is not going to motivate an individual to visit that particular retail store. However, the absence will definitely demotivate them. Let's say poor assortment. This is definitely a hygiene factor that can lead to demotivation. Whereas availability of an extremely good assortment as compared to other retailers or unique assortment can definitely work as a motivation factors. So I am hopeful that you got some perspectives about the hygiene and motivation factors in both these contexts. Now, the another theory which we'll be discussing as far as the perspective of motivation is concerned is Maslow's need hierarchy theory. Now, this again is one of the popular theories as far as motivation is concerned, and this was indeed proposed by Abraham Maslow. Now, this particular theory says that the needs can be arranged in a hierarchy, and only once the lower level needs are satisfied, which is basically physiological safety, security, love and belonging, only then an individual will move towards satisfying, or if will look for ways to satisfy self-esteem and self-actualization needs. Now, whenever we are talking about physiological needs, what we mean is the needs that are vital for survival, and these are precisely looked at from the perspective of food, clothing and shelter. Now, when you are talking about safety and security needs, they precisely highlight that an individual will always look for order in his life, his or her life, or some kind of security in their life, right? So these needs are basically captured in the safety and security needs, and I would again say these are precisely linked with controlling and looking for order in one's life. Now, we all know that human being or a man has been considered as a social animal. So the third set of needs which we precisely consider in Maslow's need hierarchy is love and belonging, which is about looking for acceptance, or let's say the need for relationships. Now, when we are talking about the higher order needs, what we consider is self-esteem and self-actualization needs. Now, self-esteem needs are precisely about the need for ego satisfaction and need for respect, which means you would look forward to be respected in, let's say, in your workplace or in general in your life. Now, many times brands also kind of use the perception building strategies to satisfy self-esteem needs, right? Then finally you get to self-actualization needs, which are precisely looked at from the perspective of, or as Abraham Maslow has put it, what a man can be, he must be. This is all about realizing what is the purpose of one's life, or maybe doing what thing an individual is best at or capable of doing in best possible ways. Now, whenever we are talking about self actualization, this is many times also looked at from the perspective of hobbies, which means doing something which you think you are best at or you would be best at, or something that you would enjoy doing for your life. Now, whenever we transpose Abraham Maslow's need hierarchy theory in retailing context, this is how it looks like. So when you talk about physiological needs, all the retailers who are operating in the domains of, let's say, food business, clothing and shelter will occupy a place in psychological needs domain. Now, let's say housing, apparel, restaurants, hotels, and even medicines, and the brands which you can consider in this are Domino's, Pantaloons and DLF. Now, while Domino's caters to food business, Pantaloons clothing and DLF is all about housing. So this is one of the aspects of physiological needs. Now, when you get to safety and security needs, insurance sector, if you look at LIC, Zindagi ke saath bhi, Zindagi ke baad bhi, it is more about offering a security to your family or your loved ones when you will not be there around them. So that aspect of offering security again can be looked at from the perspective of safety and security needs. Even when someone is planning for retirement plans, when they look for some financial security when their job is done, can also be counted in the orbit of safety and security. Bank lockers, CCTV cameras are all going to be under the same heading. Now, whenever you are looking at the needs of love and belonging, we look at it from the perspective of all these social media applications which usually allow people to connect with a lot of people and satisfy their belonging needs. Now, that could be Facebook, Instagram, or even joining clubs can also be considered under this domain. But one popular example of this can be Harley Owners Group, which is basically the group of people who own a Harley Davidson, and what they precisely do is they keep organizing particular day of rides or riding activities, so that all those people who eventually own a Harley Davidson can connect with each other, and this in a way also fosters community feeling. So this is how it looks like. Harley Owners Group, where Harley Davidson owners around the world bound to the passion to ride gather to celebrate. HOG memberships provide access to a world of exclusive benefits to help you get the most of your ownership experience. Now, as far as this is concerned, I would again urge you to go back and Google more about it, and maybe you can visit this page. Now, when you get to the facet of self-esteem, which again is about ego satisfaction or need for respect, can also be reflected in luxury brands. Let's say by wearing expensive watches, or even with respect to apparels, wearing very expensive brands or driving a very expensive or elite car. Now, this many times, as I had said in the beginning, is also done by strategies of brand perception. Now, when you talk about Raymond, it's all about the complete man, which again can be aligned with the ego of a man, or Gillette, the best a man can get. So many times you will see a lot of marketers will be using taglines, or let's say integrated marketing communications program, to indicate or satisfy the self-esteem of their targeted audience. Now, eventually, when you get to self-actualization, it is all about, as I had said, what a man can be, he must be. Now, this is all about pursuing your hobbies, higher education, or travel, because self actualization is all about doing what you think you are best at, or something that you would like to continue because you are passionate about it in your life. So, I hope you got some perspective about Maslow's need hierarchy in the core of a retailing dynamics. Now, as we move further, we'll be talking about another elements of the psychological field. Now, another key element in the psychological field is indeed learning. Now, learning technically is defined as a relatively permanent change in behavior. Now, whenever we are talking about the facet of a relatively permanent change in behavior, what we are trying to say is that either you have gained some experience, let's say, of using a new product or maybe visiting a new retailer, and you continued with it for a longer time because you either liked the product or you were satisfied, or let's say you were really impressed by the experience which the retailer offered you. So it became a part of your habit, and then it just became a part of your routine. So this is how we look at the perspective of a relatively permanent change in behavior. Now, learning in simplistic way, it could also be about learning or gaining experience about new products or offerings, or even about new retailer. Let's say many times if there is a new restaurant in your city, you might be excited to visit it, right? And then you might compare it with your other food experiences in the same city or of similar retailers, restaurants or hotels, as far as food retailing is concerned, right? And then you will be eventually deciding whether you will be visiting this particular restaurant again or not. Now, when we talk about learning, this can precisely happen either by experience or knowledge. Now, whenever you are talking about experience, this could be by, let's say, as I just said, you visited the new restaurant and then you decided whether you liked it or not, or whether you would be visiting it again or not. But another perspective could be, let's say, in a retail establishment or on a grocery retailer, you might see sample stations where they are giving you a chance to try new products. In many times, even in Big Bazaar also, you must have seen that you will see certain staff cooking pasta and they'll ask you to experience that. And this is precisely done for new brands. Now, this again can be looked at as the facet of learning. But today's technologies also offers you the access to augmented reality and virtual reality to experience products in different ways, or maybe to have a more of a very heightened immersive experience as far as the product offerings or service offerings are concerned, or even when different retail establishments are concerned. But whenever you are talking about knowledge, you are learning about or a product or service or maybe a new retailer when they share information with you. Now, this information is first shared just to get the attention, which means they want you to be aware about their product, service, or about the retailer. Then they would further want you to have interest in that, then have a desire for it, or maybe then take an action, either buy the product or service offering or visit that retail establishment, and finally satisfaction. Precisely what I have just done is I have taken you through the pathway of AIDS model, which is all about attention, interest, desire, action, and finally satisfaction, which happens once you are satisfied with the product or service offering, or you enjoy the experience of visiting that particular retail establishment. Now, learning technically has four key elements, which is drive, cues, responses, and reinforcement. Now, drive means strong internal stimuli that motivate a response from the buyer, which means these would actually stimulate you to buy a certain product or service. And motivation in simplistic sense means the zeal that drives people to act. Now, cues means these are the factors which determine when, where, and how an individual responds. This is precisely weak stimulus that provides strength and direction to motive. Let's say you have a strong drive to buy a car and you are all prepared and you are also doing your research with respect to looking at the various options which are available, you are indeed doing a very extensive pre-purchase search, because this can be considered as a high involvement purchase. Now queues could be, let's say the particular retailer is offering you 15,000 off in that particular week, right? Or he's offering you some extra freebies which otherwise could involve a cost around 1 lakhs as far as the purchase of a car is concerned. Maybe let's say a free stereo system or other free things that a retailer could be interested in or is willing to offer you. Now these can be considered as cues because these are in a way encouraging and stimulating you to close the deal then and there itself, or maybe make the purchase of the product then and there itself, right? In terms of queues, let's say when you are hungry or we look at retail establishments, this could be happy hours also. Many times in various restaurants, hotels, or maybe let's say pubs, you could see happy hours in which either you are provided food at discounted rates or buy one get one, such offers are provided. Now that in ways can be considered as a queue as far as the experience of, let's say, hotels, restaurants is concerned, and it can work likewise for other retail establishment also. Now the third element which forms an inherent part of learning is response. Now this is ways in which a person reacts or manifests in the form of a behavior. Now in simplistic ways this could be purchase, but whenever we are talking about a digital world, recommending a product to someone, liking, retweeting, resharing, and even commenting positively on a particular video, let's say on any post, whether it is a Facebook post or Instagram post by the marketer or particular retailer, can also be considered as a response. Response precisely indicates how the individual is behaving. Now that can be related to a particular product or service offering, or that can also be related to a particular retailer. Let's say if there is a particular retail store, new retail store that has opened in your city, you visited it, then they posted some video on Instagram or let's say Facebook, and you commented very positively below that. Now that in many ways can be considered as a response, and this also amounts to positive electronic word of mouth. Now the final element of learning is reinforcement, which indeed is followed by a reaction, and if we look at it technically, it is all about encouraging a pattern of behavior or reward in terms of satisfaction and incentive, and eventually leads to habit formation. Now reinforcement simply indicates you want the particular customer or an individual to visit your store again and again. Now positive reinforcement is could be related to the facets of offering them more of discounts or some special deals or offers. Now if on the basis of that they are visiting you again and again, this is a case of positive reinforcement. In simplistic ways means you want to push the behavior or the positive behavior which they are incurring as far as the particular retail establishment or the purchase of a product or service is concerned, right? Let's say if I visit a particular restaurant for lunch, right? So I had a good experience, then they might say, okay, if you visit us again, we'll give you 10% discount. Now that can be an example of reinforcement. In other ways, they might say, okay, we'll be offering you a free meal next week. So that again can be considered as an example of reinforcement, because the whole idea is to make sure that you keep visiting them again and again. Now this is again one of the facets of learning as far as reinforcement is concerned. Now the third important element of psychological field is perception, which is all about how prospects or consumers organize and interpret information. In simplistic word, it's all about how they make sense out of the information, right? And the important facets of perception are selective attention, selective retention, and distortion. Now selective attention simply indicates the tendency of the individuals to focus on certain aspects of their environment while ignoring others. See, it can also be looked at from the perspective of filtering out irrelevant or unimportant stimuli or information. Now this is all about what you consider as irrelevant or unimportant. See, even if you look at a retailer or let's say a marketer, there is too much of information which is being shared with us, right? Even if you watch a television program, you might see 10-20 ads in that particular 1 hour, and you are definitely not going to retain everything. There are only a few ads that you might retain, an ad which is very creative or which used very bright colors or was very humorous, or maybe they kind of presented you something which was unheard of or unique, or something which stayed with you, right? It had that element of making sure that it stayed with you, right? So this is all about selective attention. The whole idea of a retailer per se marketer is going to be make sure that the information which they are sharing stays with you. But it is all this clutter in today's marketing environment, too much of advertisements, especially in a digital world, or even when you are watching your favorite television show. This clutter kind of inhibits or delimits your capacity to retain everything, right? And anyway, you have a very limited cognitive capacity to retain many things as far as the present retailing or marketing dynamics are concerned. So job of a retailer is entirely about making sure that it stays with you. Now this attention can be anyway aligned with, making sure that the consumers get to know about your retail store, or with respect to the product or service offerings that you are selling in your retail store. See, one way of getting the attention of consumers could be you have put a very huge creative billboard in your city. So that might catch the attention of the prospective customers or customers. Or let's say you have come up with very unique offers which you are conveying to them in humorous ways. Now that can also be considered as a way of getting their attention, right? Many times retailers will also use attractive window displays to catch attention. So these are one of the two examples that you can see on screen. One is by the Shoppers Stop, another one is by the Home Center. As far as big retailers or departmental stores are concerned, or even malls are concerned, window displays are precisely used heavily for getting the attention of the customers. Now the next part is selective retention, which is about the tendency of the individuals to remember information that is consistent with their existing beliefs, attitudes or preferences, while forgetting or minimizing information that contradicts their preconceived notions. See, even with respect to what catches their attention, they are not going to retain everything. They are only going to retain those things which align with their existing beliefs, attitudes or preferences. Now this can happen on a variety of ways. Let's say a new retailer has come into the market, and from any other sources you had heard that their after sales services are not good, or maybe the prices which they are charging are too high. So even when they are trying to share information with you as far as the positive aspects of that particular retail stores are concerned, maybe let's say we are offering you best of prices and we offer best of after sales services, you might not register that because of the pre-existing beliefs that you have. And the last phase is distortion in the context of perception, which is all about the alteration and misinterpretation of information based on individual biases, beliefs and expectations. Now distortion again acts as a huge impediment as far as the objective of retailers and marketers in building perception is concerned. Their individual biases are definitely going to impact how they perceive a particular product or a service offering, or a marketer or a particular retailer, vis-a-vis how the retailer or marketer wants them to think of themselves. See, you need to understand one thing which is very important in marketing. The perception always lies in the mind of the buyer. Though the seller or the marketer, or maybe let's say a retailer, will make all efforts to make sure that they successfully can build positive perception about their brand, product or service offering, or maybe the retail establishment, but it is eventually all going to be about how the consumer perceives that particular brand. That's why you will see this war between, let's say, Apple lovers or non-Apple lovers, while the iPhone lovers will have all the reasons to tell you why it is one of the best mobiles as far as the price range is concerned. You will also have a certain segment of people who will say they don't think that a phone is worth paying rupees 1 lakh or even more than that. So this again is the whole idea of building perceptions, or as and when, even when you look at it, other facets, whether it is about selective attention, retention or distortion. Now the last facet as far as consumer decision making processes are concerned is going to be about output. Now the output is all about understanding whether the consumer is satisfied with their product or service offering, dissatisfied, or he or she had a delighted experience. Now we are precisely looking at it from the perspective of product or service first, and then we look at it from the perspective of a retailer. Now when product or service performance meets expectations, which means the consumers get what they had expected, they are definitely going to be satisfied. But when the product or service performance exceeds expectations, which means you are offering them an experience which is much more than they had expected, it is definitely going to be a delighted experience, or they will definitely experience a wow factor or feelings of delight. Now when the product or service performance falls short of expectations, we call it a feeling of dissatisfaction, which means you have not been able to provide them what they were expecting. Now this is related to products and services. Now you can also transpose this to a retail establishment. Now let's say the experience of visiting a retail store, buying products from there, easy processes, you don't have to stand in queue for long times, there is a very good assortment of products, unique products are available. The retailer is also making an efforts to offer unique and memorable experience, can eventually lead to satisfied and delighted experiences. It is more about how extra mile retailer is walking to make sure that delighted experiences can be delivered. So in this case, if you recollect the experience of Coffee Wonderland, which we had discussed in detail, as far as the Starbucks, this Starbucks roastery, which is based in Shanghai, is concerned, it is all about offering a very good delighted experiences to the shoppers. So this is one example that you can consider. And finally, as far as the retail establishment is concerned, you can also look at it or try to see what are the factors that are leading to dissatisfaction. Now, one factor could be, let's say, customers have to stand in queues for a longer time to make payments, or maybe the products which are available or the assortment which is available is not of very high quality, or maybe value offerings are not available. Because if you want the customer base to be large, or you want to have a mass approach, which means you want customers to visit from all varied segments as far as different age groups, income level, occupations are concerned, so you definitely need to have the assortment which can cater to all these segments. And when customers expect such, then that can also be a reason for dissatisfaction. But there is again another thing which becomes very important as far as the facets of marketing is concerned, which is all about cognitive dissonance. Now, cognitive dissonance simply indicates the feelings of anxiety, doubt, or uncertainty which a consumer experiences after they have made the purchase for the product. Now, this is more going to be situations, let's say, when you have purchased a mobile or an expensive mobile, then you might think, oh, did I made the right choice, or I would have considered that particular option. Now, these feelings can precisely be attributed to cognitive dissonance, which again means that you are having feelings of doubt, anxiety, or you are feeling uneasy with respect to the purchase that you have made. Now, in this case, it becomes important for a marketer, even after the product has been sold, to foster confidence in the shoppers or buyers and give them the feeling that they have made the best choice as far as their purchase were concerned. Many times you will see many retailers or marketers will have hoardings like, or will send you emails like, congratulations on being a part of family of 1 million. Now, that particular 1 million definitely indicates that a lot of people considered us or picked us up in with respect to competing retailers. So you have also done the right choice by pursuing that. Now, this again is one of the perspectives of kind of reducing cognitive dissonance. Otherwise, the another strategy which is precisely used for reducing dissonance is health check calls, in which you immediately call the customer after they have purchased the product or utilize the service, and you ask them if they are satisfied, if there are any problems, or if there is more that you can do to help them. Let's say if there is an issue, how much easily or how fastly you resolve it is again going to have an influence or cognitive dissonance. So all these facets were about the input, process and output as far as the consumer decision making is concerned. And I hope you enjoyed the way we looked at it from the perspective of not only as far as the purchase of products and services is concerned, but also from the facets of how we can precisely look at it from the core of retail establishment or from the perspective of retail establishment. So thanking you for now. As we'll move forward, we'll be again looking at how consumers make choices for channels or how consumers pick up different retailers. And trust me, this again is going to be a very delighted or an interesting discussion that we'll be having as we move forward. So looking forward to meeting you in the next session. Thank you.